Alright, so in our experiment today, we are going to be synthesizing different esters by a process known as esterification. And when you make an ester, typically what we're going to be reacting together is a carboxylic acid, which usually has a very strong pungent smell. We're going to react that with an alcohol in the presence of an acid catalyst, and that catalyst is something that speeds up the reaction. It makes it go a lot quicker than if we didn't have that catalyst present. And we represent that catalyst by using an H+. So today our catalyst is going to come from sulfuric acid, H2SO4. So when we add those two reactants together with the help of that catalyst and we give it some energy, we stick it in a boiling water bath, we end up producing an ester in addition to water as one of the byproducts. And that ester that we make usually is going to have more of a pleasant smell associated with it than the reactant, than the carboxylic acid. So we're going to be detecting the scents or the smells of the esters today to confirm that we've actually successfully carried out the esterification process. Alright, so we're going to assemble the reaction, and the first thing that we're going to do, that we did do here, is to measure out the carboxylic acid in each of these labeled test tubes. And I'm following the procedure that's outlined in your lab manual. So in test tubes 1, I've measured out about approximately 1 milliliter of glacial acetic acid. And acetic acid is the common name for ethanoic acid. And you'll see it's a clear liquid. In test tube 2, I have approximately 1 gram of benzoic acid, and you'll see benzoic acid is a solid. It's a white crystalline solid. And then in test tube 3, I have approximately 1 gram of salicylic acid, which is also a white solid. And in my remaining test tubes, I sort of repeat that. So in test tube 4, I have 1 ml of the acetic acid. In test tube 5, I have about 1 gram of the benzoic acid. And in test tube 6, I have 1 gram of the salicylic acid. And then in test tube 7, 1 ml of the acetic acid. Test tube 8, 1 gram of the benzoic acid. And in test tube 9, 1 gram of the salicylic acid. So the next step would be to add the corresponding alcohol to each of these tubes as outlined in your instructions. So in this step, we're going to be adding the corresponding alcohol to the tubes. And in test tubes 1, 2, and 3, what I've done in here, you'll notice now that all of these have a liquid in them. I've added to each of them 1 milliliter of a first alcohol, which is methanol. Alright, so I've added approximately 20 drops, which is about equal to 1 ml of this first alcohol here to test tubes 1, 2, and 3. And what I'm going to do is to complete the addition of those alcohols in test tubes 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to add 1 milliliter of ethanol. And then in test tubes 7, 8, and 9, I'm going to add 1 milliliter of the third alcohol, which is butanol, according to the instructions in your lab manual. So the third and last thing that you want to make sure that you add to each of the tubes, in addition to the acid and the alcohol, is we need to add that acid catalyst in order to speed up the reaction. And the catalyst that we're using today is sulfuric acid, concentrated sulfuric acid. And what we're going to do is to add 4 drops of the concentrated sulfuric acid to each of those tubes. So to test tube 1, we add 1, 2, 3, 4 drops of that concentrated sulfuric acid. And remember, when you add things together in a test tube or in any container, you want to make sure that you agitate the components of the mixture. You can flick the bottom of the test tube, you can swirl a little bit just to make sure that everything is uniformly mixed. All right, and after we've added that third component, the acid catalyst, and we're just gonna place our test tubes for about 5 minutes in our boiling water bath, which is right here. And after 5 minutes, we're gonna take them out, let them cool down a little bit, and we're gonna detect the scent in the test tubes. So after my test tubes have been sitting in the boiling water bath for about 5 minutes, I'm going to carefully remove them using a test tube holder, and I'm going to allow them to cool down for a couple minutes before I detect the scent of the, hopefully, the esters that have been produced. So after removing our test tubes from the water bath and allowing to cool a little bit, we're then going to add a little bit of deionized water to each of these tubes and then try to detect the smell of the ester. So for instance, I've just took out test tube 3. I'm going to add a few drops of water in here. And then when you detect the scent of anything in the laboratory, all right, you want to make sure that you do it properly, and the proper way to do that is to gently waft the vapors towards you. All right, and you're going to try to describe that smell or that scent. And I can tell you right now that test tube 3, it smells a little bit like a little minty. So this is where having smell-o-vision would have been very helpful, because obviously you cannot smell what I'm smelling. So your instructor will provide guidelines as to how to give you the data for the scent of these esters.